Hey everybody, welcome back to the Psychedelic Cherry. This is Garage Quest, and today we're talking about when to break the rules.
And to
Hey guys, welcome to Garage Quest. I am your host, May McDonough, and this is my co-host, Rusty. And today we're talking about breaking the fucking rules. So, we all know, you can clean it up, that D&D would be nothing without its exhausting, extensive collection of rule books.
And equally fanatical rule-going followers.
That said, there are actually some really good reasons to break the rules. There are moments when it serves the game to break the rules. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I think the first thing before we even talk about the rules is to consider what it means to win at D&D as opposed to other games.
I agree. What does it mean to win?
So, the winning state of D&D is at the end of your session, everyone at the table had a lot of fun, and you told a great story.
Yeah.
That's it. That's winning.
That's how you win.
Yeah. You win more by having even more fun. That's it.
Sure. How do you lose?
When you end the session and maybe wish that you would stay home to watch TV.
Wish that you'd stayed home to watch Game of Thrones instead of pretend to be in it. I think that's a really good point. So keeping that in mind is a really great guideline for when it's right to break the rules, because it's about the
Helping
players having a good time, which helps you win. Yeah. So let's break that down into some really common rules that we can follow as far as when to break the rules. The first situation that comes to mind for me is when the rules fall short mechanically. So a good example of this is in our house game. We kind of determined that there were opportunities in which we should be able to sneak up behind someone and slit their throat, for instance.
Or chop at a specific part of the body.
Yeah, chop someone's arm off, etc. We kind of all determined as a group that definitely should be a possibility.
Yeah.
That isn't really accounted for in
After
the
all,
books.
it can happen in real life.
Yeah.
But in this fantasy world of D&D, there aren't very clear mechanics for it. Does that mean it can't happen? And honestly, that breaks the suspension of disbelief for me.
Yeah, me too. Because
know?
if you're given a setup and you have the skills and you're just told by the DM, like, I don't know what the rules or the mechanics would be for that, so no, you can't do that. You just have to attack them. Or to say that, okay, you sneak up successfully behind him and you slit his throat and it causes him 2d8 damage. That's not right either. You know, if you successfully walk up behind someone and slit their throat, you slit their throat. I think they should die.
And I think, taking it back to the classics, like the Hobbit, the dragon Smaug. Like, Smaug. Smaug was defeated by putting one of those arrows, those iron arrows, through a very, very small vulnerability in his scale armor. In the D&D world, there's no way you could take out a dragon with a single shot of even a ballista bolt.
No.
But
Full
it does
hit bags.
help the storytelling, and it's just as believable to take down a dragon through the only vulnerable spot in his natural armor as it is to sit there and casting spell after spell or hacking and slashing for multiple rounds of combat.
And out of those two scenarios, I feel like it's more fun and more clever to go with the former.
Exactly.
If you it gives your adventurers an opportunity to have to think through, well, how do we penetrate this dragon, and have to find out for themselves, oh, he has this weakness.
Penetrate the dragon. Hashtag me too.
Oh boy.
Careful.
Watch it. Yeah, so in our house we came up with our own mechanics for it, and if that's something you want to do, you can do that too. It's definitely a situation where it should be possible, and you know what, Gary Gygax and all the people who've contributed since him have done wonderful jobs covering a lot of mechanics in this world. But unfortunately, scenarios arise where it's just not a thing.
Well, so a lot of you might be familiar with the Unearthed Arcana that Wizards of the Coast releases periodically. Mm-hmm. That's essentially open beta test material. They're actively trying to expand and enrich the rule sets to compensate for gaps in the canon, and a lot of those mechanics that are favored in the community will end up getting incorporated into the actual books, like Xanathar's Guide to Everything is a good example. That's got a lot of stuff that has been refined through the Unearthed Arcana playtesting.
Okay, so let's move to another scenario I was thinking about, which is if it gets rid of a rule or a condition that really doesn't serve the game. Now, my example of this is spell components. They just kind of suck, In theory, in concept, really cool. You need this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
Like a witch's brew to make a spell.
Maybe at a low level, it would make sense to make your characters or make your players have to find them. But at a certain point, it's so mundane.
It's just not practical.
It'd be like at epic levels of play having to dictate that you purchased rations. It's like,
and if you think about pragmatically, what that comes down to on a meta level in actual gameplay is all it comes down to is a player having to remember at the very beginning of the session to tell the DM, hey, before this session, I went out and picked all the things I need for my spells. Is that cool? And the DM is like, yeah, sure, I guess, So it's just kind of a burdensome, dull thing that doesn't do anything for the game at all.
And honestly, the part that does make the spell components part in particular beneficial to the game is purely on the role-playing side.
Yeah.
Like when Elemenos would pick an eyelash, from her own face, and a tiny pinch of gum arabic to cast
It's invisibility, I think.
Okay.
And I have not been doing that for about 5 levels.
And no one, where do you get gum arabic in Faerun? Come on, no one's going to contest that. But the fact
as a fresh player, because when I came up with that character, I was starting from, that was my first character. As a fresh player, I didn't understand that. So I did specify to the DM, I got to go somewhere that has gum arabic. Where do I find that? And he did tailor an adventure for me in response to my request, and that was cool. And because I was a low level character, it was something to use, me seeking out components I need.
Yeah.
But
again, this is an example of rules where appropriate to enhance the game.
Yeah.
To make the winning more winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just stops being fun if you have to find spell components or hunt your food or, whatever it is at a certain level. Yeah. It just becomes a throwaway task.
That said, we did land on spell components that required a specific gold piece value.
Yeah, that you better have.
Yeah, but if you notice, most of those spells tend to be ritual oriented anyway, or relatively higher power spells that it would kind of make sense to make your players take the extra step to be prepared for.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice in general, too, just to have, like, okay, as a house, we're going to throw away the spell components rule with these exceptions, because it still is the potential for fodder for some sort of adventure. You know, is still there with the components. It's just asking a bit much of a 15th level player.
Yeah. Or sometimes you might want to keep that in your back pocket and choose to enforce the spell component rule.
That's true.
But we'll leave that for next episode.
Okay. It's fun to be a dick sometimes. Just 1% of the time. Another scenario, I consider it perfectly okay to adjust the rules or break the rules, is just when it gets in the way of progress. And I know a common complaint, at least in our group, but I think in general too amongst adventurers, is just how experience points are doled out according to the book. It starts out working really well, but as you advance to like 14, 15, 16th level and above, the amount of time you would have to spend on big baddies, you know, ancient dragons, etc., big giant hit point bags, is so, you would have to be killing so many of those per session to be leveling up at any sort of regular rate.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of impossible if you want to do anything other than damage the baddies, because you're going to take hit points throughout your adventure. It's frustrating.
Yeah, even a very experienced dungeon master that very liberally gives out experience points and packs the encounters with skill challenges, interaction-based reward systems, you know, and all the other kinds of things beyond just challenge rating and combat encounter, as a way to reward the characters with experience points. Even when you combine that experienced DM with power players that can mow through most bad guys, once you get past the middle tier of the game, like 12th level and higher, it's multiple sessions deep before you even get close to leveling up.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel that's why a lot of players get bored with characters fast, is because you make it to a certain threshold and then your character's stagnant. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, there's already little elements of that's going to happen anyway, because at a certain level, you're not looking at big changes from level to level anyway. So anything on top of that is really frustrating. And I know that in our group, one thing we do, I think we all do it a little differently. We actually don't just agree upon a rule of how to dish out XP. But I know for me personally, when I DM, I look at levels of difficulty that the adventurers are conquering throughout the quest. If they make it through a dungeon, if they solve a puzzle excellently, if they, as like you said, skill checks, even honestly, if it's just a session with really incredible role playing, I reward that with XP, because I want to reward the kind of session that I like to experience. Yeah, so I think that's definitely a good rule to keep in mind. Are people getting to move through the game at the pace they want to? Because not everyone we meet every week, and we have for years, and we still aren't being able to move up a level every 3 sessions, you know, and until we started really
we've been playing
buffering.
I'd say 40 sessions a year for 3 years. And
dear God.
Yeah.
Moving on. So my last scenario that I came up with was simply when everyone at the table is cool with it. You know, if you're all here to play a game, D&D has Wizards of the Coast at this point has done an amazing job creating a world for you to function in, giving you rules for you to reference so that you don't get into arguments very often. And they've done a great job. But frankly, if everyone in the room agrees that something should go differently, why not do it that way? A huge rule, I think, in playing with your friends is don't piss them off, you know?
Yeah, this is your game. If it makes everybody at the table happier to play a certain way, play that way.
Yeah, play that way.
Yeah.
You know, unless it's really not enjoyable for you. But I think at that point...
Yeah, that's contrary to
the rule.
Yeah.
The rule is, if everyone says so, if everyone agrees, you're doing a good job.
And that said, the core rule set, like, that's why D&D is so popular, is it provides enough of that framework for you to have that... enough of a reliability in something that everybody can agree on, a rule set that everybody kind of agrees with, so that there's a continuity to the experience, you know? And that is going to ebb and flow with every session. Yeah. And if everybody's just in tune with that and not being I'm sorry, but I am page 158 and it says, like, it's
which
more
we
fun.
all could be at some time.
Yeah, if it's in good spirit, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
And by the way, I'm sure over the course of this series, we're gonna have a lot of these rule heads. They're gonna be calling us out when we make little blunders.
Yeah, come for us.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Heads.
Let's just keep the conversation going. It's all right. It's all about having fun.
Fuck your rules.
And winning the game.
One
last thing though, DMs, hide your dice rolls.
Yeah.
Hide your dice rolls.
Why do you have a DM screen?
You never want to be in a situation where everyone's having a great time and then suddenly your totally unexpected roll is going to throw a monkey wrench in that whole gear work and everybody has seen the die roll.
Yeah.
No. Always hide it. If you get something that just you absolutely can't play with, just really quickly fudge it and act like nothing happened. And
you're talking when it really would ruin everyone's ability to enjoy the game.
Exactly.
Because as the DM, it's your job to throw a monkey wrench in a little bit.
Chance and realism are important parts of the gameplay.
Yeah, and it's okay to scare the players or challenge the players. You just don't really want to piss off the players.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just fudge it a little. Anything else from you? I think I'm good too. I think those are pretty well covered. Those are when we think it's okay to break the rules. You might play a much looser game.
When do you think that it's okay to break the rules?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us below?
That's right. Please subscribe. This has been Garage Quest. I'm May. This is Rusty. Go break the fucking rules.